how about Sasha Vezenkov from Greece is an under the radar signing. The
That's
Kings
a good
brought
one.
him over. Yeah, the Kings brought him over on a very reasonable deal from Greece. He was the EuroLeague MVP, lefty. Maybe might remind you a little of Joe Ingles. Can cut, can really shoot it. Very strange looking shot, but it's something. And Sam might detail this, but the Kings have been very focused on. Right, they've sent almost everyone that matters over to Greece. I know early in their offseason, Mike Brown went over there, had dinner with Sasha Vezenkov and like got to know him better. And they need wing help. They are probably the fringe level contender in the league that is thinnest on the wing. There was talk of a Kyle Kuzma chase. It ends up they bring back Harrison Barnes. They bring Vezenkov over from Greece. It's somewhat of a stable offseason, but Sam, I'd love to get your thoughts on it. It's an okay one.
No, Slater, I like that pick because A, I think he can help, but then B, the truth is I don't truly know. And one of my favorite things about this situation is the mystery involved with Sasha. Sasha can't even say his name right. That's how unknown he is. Sasha Vezenkov is that you hear EuroLeague MVP, you are instantly impressed, and you should be. You see some of the clips, they look great. Scorer. Saw a clip the other day that was a Klay Thompson-esque, and I know that's a little too hyperbolic, but they had a special YouTube clip that talked about how he had 24 points without taking a dribble in one game. And you feel like this could be an impact player. And then you kind of hit on the other stuff with the Kings. Like you also see the amount of attention and care that the program, the Kings organization, put into trying to make this happen. That Mike Brown did go over there. The front office guys did go over there. Even Martina Kolkatranas, COO, went over there. Quick backstory: if you go back 20-ish years, Martina was part of the group at the time with Jason Levian, who was an agent who would go on to be an executive for the Kings and within the league, was part of a group that played a part in bringing guys like Hito Turkoglu over to the Kings and Peja Stojakovic. And so it's almost a kind of a harkens back to those days if Sasha can be that guy. But I don't know. And I can't wait to see if he's really going to be an impact rotation player. You hit on the contract, 3 years, 20 million, very reasonable. But man, in terms of the hype, like not only just the clips, but even Sasha at, I think, 27 years old, the way that he has characterized this choice to come it feels very much like one of those elite European players who was probably going to be content just making money over there for his whole career. But a year ago, his rights get traded from the Cavs to the Kings. In one of those deals where if he becomes a player, this trade will be one of those that you look at and go, man, that's crazy. Like,
what the Cavs traded? It was like the
49th,
49th
yeah,
pick. And you know who they picked?
Isaiah Mobley.
Evan Mobley's brother.
Yeah.
It's just, hey, get Evan Mobley's brother in the program. You're right. If Vezenkov comes over and he's a closing wing on a West contender, that would be like,
I mean, the Kings even got cash in the deal, which kind of tells you all you need to know. And so they take the rights. And if you go back to 2017, make sure I don't mess this up. He was taken, I think, in the second round. Maybe you can confirm that for me, Slater. But
yeah, late in the draft.
Yeah, actually 58th, I believe, is really late. Yeah. He's just one of those rights guys, one of those kind of bag of peanuts things that gets thrown into different trades, like a player that the rest of us have never heard of. And now he's going on Instagram and putting heartfelt messages out there about how this was the toughest decision of his life. He had a virtual meeting with the Kings at the start of free agency, where they got on the computer and talked to him and kind of got this thing over the finish line. And then the deal was done by the next morning. So this Kings offseason, even locally, there's some fans that I've talked to where they're kind of shrugging like, okay, Barnes, which I think fans are a little mixed on after the way he played in the playoffs. Okay. Even the Sabonis extension, which I think people are nuts. Like I understand that it's
pricey,
massive...
Sam. It's very pricey.
Slater, did you forget what city they play ball in? Like, this is what cracks me up.
They've been a seed
team for 15 years.
I get it, but it's a lot.
But we say that. All right, I'm a little bit devil's advocating it here. That's not a word, but like we say that about all these deals, and then 3 years down the road, it's not a lot. You know what I'm saying? Like the cap has. This is a quick aside that I think we need to pound this point on the pod going forward, because I spent some time last night looking at these numbers. I think we're not doing our jobs in the media of helping people understand and properly contextualizing the reality that the cap, and I got to cheat and look at notes here. The cap has doubled since Fred, you're already nodding. What year was it in the
2016? So
Since
2015-16, the cap was 67.
Right.
And then this year it's like twice that.
Well, and if you go back even farther, here's all you kind of need to know is that in 2005, 2006, which coincidentally is when I started jumping in and covering the league, it was 49.5. So you go a decade from 2005 to 2015, a decade where it only goes up 20 million, basically from 50 to 70. And then, in the past 7 years, this puppy has doubled. So truthfully, I don't know how to look at these contracts. I get it. Sabonis is a ton of money, but guess what? If they lose Sabonis, they lose their entire plan.
And Sam, not only that, but with the new CBA, well, first of all, there's going to be a massive infusion of cash coming when this new TV deal hits for the league. And in this new CBA, there's a max of 10% raises on the cap every year. And that is probably, at least people around the league, they anticipate basically 10% raises on the cap every year. You can't get more than an 8% raise on a contract year to year. So every year in relation to the cap, if the cap is rising 10 and the contract is rising 8, you're getting a smaller and smaller percentage of the cap, a smaller and smaller percentage of the max. So yeah, I'm with you. Like I look at, we're going to talk about worse contracts at some point, right? And I'm sure someone will mention Jeremy Grant.
Apologies. Yeah. I'm going to finish because we're not going to go back to the Kings, I don't think. But to piggyback on your point, the percentage thing I kind of love. I'm going to start adding percentages in my coverage because Slater, when the Kings signed Barnes for 3 years, 54, by and large, what did you see as a reaction? Like, damn, really? Harrison Barnes still getting 54? So people see that number, they thought it was too much. Harrison Barnes' last contract with the Kings was 4 years, $85 million in 2019, right? At that time, that was 20.7% of the cap. This current contract is 12.5% of the cap. Like you almost cut in half.
The mid-level is done. At this point, he's barely making above the mid-level. I mean, we're talking about Harrison Barnes almost as a mid-level type guy.
Right. So. That's my point. Like that's a pretty reasonable contract.
Look at, particularly a regular season bargain, which, I understand that. I think some of the frustration that you feel, coming about the Kings, maybe is more like, they want to make the next step. They want to, win a West Finals, get to an NBA Finals. Like that is like the dream for people around Sacramento or people around the league believe that's always should be the goal of a team. And, in some ways, what Sabonis is as one of your two best players, you might have a playoff cap. And Harrison Barnes has shown that he can kind of fade in the playoffs. But I do think sometimes we underrate how important regular seasons are. We saw it with what Sacramento evolved into from just a scene last year during that 82-game regular season. Like for them to just repeat last season, there might be, it won't be as, glory filled. But it's still important to have 82 Harrison Barnes games, and it's still important to try to win 48 to 54 regular season games and try to get a 3, 4, 5 seed in the West. And Harrison Barnes very much helps you to that goal. Sabonis, keeping him around obviously does. So it's a little of that. The counter argument I think to what we're talking about, Sam, is like you might have just put in a cap on this core that is below championship level. But, did you have a path to make it above championship level?
Well, but the irony there is that your word choice being cap, and the cap itself is going to continue moving, and that's going to create more opportunity.
You've committed to Fox and Sabonis being your 1-2 punch.
So what is, and this is, I don't sit on either side of this fence, but what is the argument? So, was it Kuzma? Was it Dylan Brooks? Like, who was it?
I'm fine with the Barnes thing. I mean, sure, you could say Kuzma's like a little bit higher upside next year. I'm not saying that would vault him into like some, elite contender necessarily. I think I'm talking more of the Sabonis signing, just keeping the ink dry, keeping the flexibility.
I just think if you go, and you and I worked on this at the time, this, if you go back a year ago, like before their little Cinderella story, like what was the chatter that we had? It was at least loud enough that we had to look into. The chatter was like, Sabonis okay in Sacramento? Is he like being there? And we looked into it and we're told going into the year, he's fine. He just needed to learn about how Mike Brown was going to run the team. But there was like this little angst that felt very predictable because it's Sacramento. Like, of course, this guy might be looking elsewhere already, and we thought that might be the case, and then it wasn't, and then they had a great year. If he would have been a free agent next summer, obviously.
Do you think he would have got this number in free agency? And that's the question. And I think what you're referring to almost is like the Sacramento tax that you're paying a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I happen to, like you do now as well, live in a region where it's like they just haven't been relevant for 15 years. You cannot afford it. It's an absolute disaster if you have, first of all, not only walks for nothing, if you have an entire year wondering if Sabonis is even going to be around. I don't think that would have been great for the program either.
Also, I feel like we should make a delineation here. There's a difference between the Sacramento tax when it forces you to overpay George Hill and Rajon Rondo and Zach Randolph and Vince Carter in like their elderly ages. And when it gets you to renegotiate and extend a guy who brought you to the playoffs for the first time in a decade and a half and who was a legitimate all-star.
For 5th place MVP.
Exactly. Yeah. Like there's, don't get me wrong, it's a lot for Sabonis, but there's no world in which, realistically, there's no world in which Sabonis comes out next year and isn't really good. Like he's still going to be really good. He's a really good player. And look, I don't know. Sometimes we get too judgmental on like, does it kind of hamper their path to winning a title? Maybe, but the Kings were so bad for so long, and they weren't just good last year. They had incredible vibes and they were fun. They had a great thing going. It's like, why, I don't blame them for not wanting to mess with it. I don't blame them for that.
I agree.
They re-signed Trey Lyles. They seemingly, I don't know if this is done, but he reported, Shams Charania had reported that Chris Duarte was coming their way, who, again, under the radar, but that's a guy who actually has had some good chemistry with Sabonis in Indiana, has played with him. Who knows if that helps.
Kind of like a Terrence Davis replacement. I mean, they're a little bit fuller in the middle of their rotation, right? With Vezenkov, with Duarte potentially. So that helps.
Yep. We shall see.